So I just woke up out of a dead sleep. It's exactly 2 a.m. I was dreaming of a woman sitting outside of my window. She got in. She toyed with me like a sick game of hide and seek until she pinned me against my exit door. I woke up terrified and waited for shadows out of my window. I walked down the hall to pee and couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. I rationalized my fear as I checked the house. Everything was fine. Ella is safe, cats were normal. Still, I couldn't shake this creepy feeling, and it was intensifying. I woke up my partner, who saw that I was visibly panicked, shaking and tears running down my cheeks. He got up and bravely walked with me down the house. Nothing was visibly wrong, but one step into the front bedroom felt like a wrecking ball to the gut. I felt like I had the wind knocked out of me, and my whole body turned into goose pimples, or chicken skin, if you will. I felt like I had passed a threshold where I wasn't welcome. We had a little bit of sage, so my partner started smudging the house while I meditated. He started in the bedroom, and I stood in the hallway, directing the energy to an open window and blocking access to the back of the house. I felt every second of this spirit passing through my body to cross the hallway. My skin visibly stood on end, raising and settling at the same time like a slow motion shiver. I've never had such an intense feeling. I'm not even sure how to describe it. Heavy? Large? Weighty? Those seem like words. My partner followed behind the energy, and we coaxed it out of the window. I closed it, and he continued to sage the rest of the house. He felt something too, but whatever it was, it's gone now. I don't have that intense feeling anymore, but I do think I'm going to watch a little Bob's Burgers before I try to sleep again. In the early 90s, my sister was born healthy, but a year and a half later, she died of unknown causes, SIDS. The medical team managed to resuscitate her once, but when she died again, they determined she may not make it, even if they resuscitated her again, or she would have permanent brain damage. At the brink of divorce, they had me a year later, around the same time this happened, born in the month she died, to my mom's dismay. Fast forward to a day before the accident. Weird things happened all day. Sounds of glass breaking made my parents jump and run outside, checking all our windows, but there wasn't any broken glass. This repeated itself a couple more times. My brother was just a baby, and he cried hysterically, and whenever he wasn't, he was looking up and babbling at no one. Before bed, there was knocking, and my parents checked the front door, but no one was there. I was a young kid at the time, so I was just uncomfortable, but unsure about what was going on. The next morning, my mom could not get my early riser brother up from bed, as we normally went to bed easily too. But he was fussy all night, which was unusual for him. My dad had to take me to a doctor's appointment, and usually we went as a family. Dad told us to stay home and let him sleep. We were on the interstate, and were going to take an exit, and I remember a car cutting from the far left. I always sat back seat, driver's side, so I saw it in the window, and it hit our car, leaving us in a spin while they kept going. We rolled down a steep embankment and hit a tree head on. Dad lost power steering and braking ability, so we hit a full-size tree at 75. It fell on top of the car, crushing the passenger side, where my mom and baby brother would have been sitting. I died. I remember it didn't hurt, and I remember being in the rubble pressed into the ground out the back window. It hurt after I was resuscitated in the ambulance with a neck brace. I was resuscitated again at the hospital, and they told my mom in front of me, keep her talking. If she falls asleep, she won't wake up again. Years later, I found out both my dad and I had zero chances of making it out alive. He was almost impaled through the heart by millimeters. I had a touch brain bleed. No doctor was able to believe we survived. If my brother or mom were there, they would have died. My mom told me this happened 10 years ago to the day that my sister died, but they didn't resuscitate her a second time like they did me. She felt like fate was trying to keep her from ever having a baby girl. What bothers me most is our baby pictures are identical. Sure, we dress different, but other than that, you couldn't tell us apart. I'm sure I'm not her, but I feel chills now every time I look at those pictures, and mortified that my mom disclosed to the day we almost died was the same day she passed away. Mom believes my older sister was looking out for us the day before and helped me survive that day because the bleed should have taken my life. Part of me feels guilty that they saved me and tried a second time, but not with her. Even with my injuries and blood loss, they tried, but they didn't try with a healthy baby. Other things have happened in the house before and after this all took place, and to this day, I feel uncomfortable at the family home. I need some help figuring out what is going on in my house. About a year and a half ago, I moved into an older home out in the country with a friend from college. We have bedrooms that share a wall. Ever since we've moved in there have been strange instances. During the day, we'll get weird feelings that something is watching us. We'll hear footsteps upstairs, and things will be moved around or knocked over in the kitchen. About 6 months in of us living together, her boyfriend moved in, and I started staying over at my boyfriend's more often. At this point, I would notice when I got home my TV was on. It's always off when I leave in the morning for work. I don't sleep with it on. And a decorative box I have under the TV unit is always shoved to the back end of the shelf. My friend said she started noticing in the mornings that I was gone that she would hear movement in my room, with the closet and dresser doors opening, clothes shifting, as if I was there. It seems as though something was mimicking the sounds I would make in the mornings as I was getting ready for work. A few weeks ago, her and her boyfriend were gone for the weekend, and I had the house to myself. The house cat was also gone for the weekend. I was woken up in the middle of the night. I'm not sure what time it was, but I felt the cat jump onto bed with me by my feet and started kneading the bed as she usually would. It wasn't until I reached down to pet him and found that nothing was there to realize he wasn't even in the house. We've also seen a man in random areas of the house, usually upstairs in one of the guest rooms or walking into a bathroom. I only caught glimpses of him, and he's always walking into a room when we catch him, and he's gone when we go to investigate. Do you guys think this stuff is related to each other? Any ideas what this could be? We live in a rural area out in the country in Illinois. We've been told there were Native Americans that used to inhabit the property. Not sure if that gives any clues. Any comments would be helpful. This happened when I was about 12 or 13, back when I had an incredible attachment to MSN. My mother had left me alone for a few hours to go grocery shopping, which meant that I had the family computer to myself, and I was excited to chat with my friends online without interruption. A few hours go by, and I still haven't moved from the computer in the living room. My mom suddenly bursts through the door with grocery bags upon grocery bags, and immediately starts yelling at me. Why didn't you help me with the groceries? I was confused and startled. I didn't know she was home. I would have come out to the car to help her. As I tell her this, she becomes angrier and explains that she saw me watching her struggle from the upstairs bathroom window, and instead of helping her, I just watched her. I froze. I knew that I hadn't left the computer on the main floor, not once. But before I could protest, she went back outside to grab the rest of the groceries. I tried to explain myself after the fact, but she didn't want to hear it. I let it go, but I knew that something was very wrong with that house. The thought of someone or something pretending to be you is the most terrifying thought to ever almost cross the boundaries into my reality. I hated that house. One night, not too long after we moved in, I was home alone and sitting on the couch in the living room. I was expecting my mother to come home any minute. While texting, I heard a knocking on the window which was behind me, across the room to the right. It was definitely coming from the window, clear as day. But as I turned around and squinted towards the window, all I saw was black nothingness into the night. But the knocking continued. I honestly thought it was my mom. Maybe she forgot her keys, I thought. But why would she be in the backyard? Why wouldn't she knock on the front door? It was a knock that demanded attention. I got up and walked towards the window. The knocking stopped as I looked into the window and saw nothing. I hesitantly pressed my hands against the cold window and cupped my face to look outside. And nothing. I turned to face the kitchen and I immediately noticed that all the cabinets were open, even the hard-to-reach ones above the fridge. I could have sworn they weren't open a second before when I approached the window. I thought that the haunting had followed my family when that happened. But luckily, nothing else happened in that house. I moved out shortly later to live on my own, and things have settled down in the paranormal realm. I lived in this house until I was 15, then moved across the country. As the house ended up staying in the family, I've been staying here since I moved back a year ago, after 7 years of being away. It wasn't a peaceful home by any means. My mother was severely mentally ill and was very violent, physically and verbally towards us, as well as neglectful. I think she perpetuated really bad energy here. When I was a kid, strange things would happen often. For example, things would go missing for months at a time before reappearing in the middle of the floor. The dog would always bark at one specific place in mid-air between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. Things on shelves downstairs would constantly get moved around or thrown on the floor. Water taps would turn on. Cabinets in the kitchen would open and close. There seemed to be some kind of spirit in a red jacket who would come to the door during the day and evening at seemingly random intervals, knock, wait, and then leave. All of these could be their own story, but few things have left a severe imprint in my memory. There was one experience in particular that comes to mind wherein we, read I in particular, left the house in a very specific condition. As I was midway through a chore, in particular, the cover for the downstairs futons were brought off the clothesline and left in a basket on top of the dryer in the laundry room, which is quite far from the room in which this takes place. The furniture was in a square L-shaped fall as it usually was. When I put the dog in the kennel, I made sure to only do up to the first lock, as he was a very good boy who never tried to get out. I remember this vividly. When we got back, I immediately went downstairs, talking with my brother, to let the dog out. He was whimpering and whining loudly as we came down the stairs and in the hall. When we turned into the family room, the dog was crouched to the very back of his kennel, sitting on top of the futon cover and visibly terrified. The kennel locks had been switched. The bottom one was now locked and the top was unlocked. The futon mattress was absolutely shredded, as if an animal with teeth had found great joy when ripping it apart. The footstool for the chair was left in a similar fashion. The faux leather upholstery had been ripped off at the corner, and the foam had very clear bite marks in it. I do mean bite marks. In addition to the bite-shaped chunks of foam torn off, there were very distinct tooth imprints torn into the foam. The shape and size of the bite marks was not even close to a dog, It was about as wide as a grown adult's jaw, and the teeth themselves were flat across with no distinct canine. You know, like a human bite mark. It was a human bite mark. The stool had been dragged over towards the futon from in the corner, about a total of 3 feet. The futon itself, normally perpendicular to the wall, had been dragged by one corner several feet until it was maybe a 30-degree angle from the wall and about 2 feet back from its normal placements on one end and like 5 on the other. We opened the kennel and the dog shot upstairs at Mach fucking 5 speed. We checked all the windows and doors and all had been locked. There was no trace of dirt or debris anywhere to suggest a break-in. There was nothing stolen. The dog wasn't physically hurt as far as we could tell. We've never found a logical explanation for this. This happened as my mother was trying to list the house for sale, and later that day, we had a house inspection lady come in. Since I've been back, nothing of this caliber has occurred. Electronics will turn on and off still, occasionally. Sometimes I hear someone knocking on the window on the path to the house. Things still go missing and reappear once in a while, but it's not a constant thing. I believe while I was gone, the house had been cleansed by a psychic. I do practice witchcraft and have put up several protection charms and barriers around the house in the time I've been here, so we haven't heard people laughing outside the windows lately. I can't go down to the basements, where the majority of the more extreme things happen, as it is rented out currently, so I can't say if it's much worse downstairs than it was. I'm wondering if the house or spirits here simply have less bad energy to feed off, or if it's just genuinely less haunted. Just today, I was trying to fall asleep and my phone turned on. It was on TikTok, but it wasn't the last video I had seen. I ignored it and tried going back to sleep. One of my papers fell off my desk. I get that my fan is on, but my fan is always on. It's never fallen before. It's never moved before either. The lights recently went out in my kitchen and they came back on when my mom accidentally burned herself. They've been going on and off at random times, but it's mostly when I'm downstairs by myself. That usually signals to me that it's time to go upstairs. The thing is that my dad recently passed away. I have dreams with him every now and then, but he's never dead in the dream. I'm way older too. The last dream I had with him, he was telling me something important. He was worried, but I forgot what he told me. A few months back, I had a weird-ass dream where someone was in my room and behind me. I pretended that I was asleep. He was talking to me and pretending to be my dad. He told me, "Bless you," but I didn't sneeze. I didn't say a word. I don't know what the fuck is going on. It was a very busy day at the store yesterday. We had way more deliveries than we could handle, and the waiting times were just terrible. Some people had to wait for their order for 2 hours. Because of the hectic evening, I was still at the store very late. The people I closed with went home, and I was all by myself. I locked the front door out of safety, and because one of the customers was threatening me before closing, I went back into the office. The thing about this office is that it's pretty closed off. The door is pretty much in the center of the store, but it's a very small room. You can only really see the rest of the store via the cameras. At around 2 a.m., I was still working on some paperwork. The store was dead quiet, and I had the office door open. All of a sudden, I heard a music box-like tune. It sounded like something that would come out of a music box, but without the mechanical stuff you always hear. The tune was pretty slow and clear, like a tune for a baby. I went to the main part of the store to check, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Scared the crap out of me. The store's pretty new, and there are lots of computers around, But I've worked there for 7 years and I've never heard anything like that before. I can't really pinpoint where the sound could have come from. It was probably some random noise made by a shake machine, but I don't get why it would randomly make a quiet tune like that, which I then wouldn't have noticed for years. My mom died in June, and after the funeral, I took in her 6-year-old cat. When he was with my mom, he stayed hidden most of the time, either under the bed or sofa. You'd rarely spot him anywhere else. After I took him in, I had no clue that this cat is actually really active, friendly, and loving. A week after moving in with me, I could see that he chose me as his owner. I have a husband and kid as well. With them, he's accepting, but doesn't show any affection. About a month after my mom had died, I noticed that the cat started and meowed in one certain spot in my kitchen, and it felt eerie. This lasted a couple of weeks. Then, it all of a sudden stopped. But now I've noticed that he won't let me look at myself in the mirror, like when I get ready for work, etc. I have 3 mirrors in total, one in the bathroom, one in the bedroom, and one in the living room. And at this point, it doesn't matter which one I choose. He insists I pay attention to him and follow him away from the mirror. At one point I joked about it that, yeah, I know, there's nothing to look at, when he started to behave like this. But now it feels off already. He could be in another room and he somehow feels when I approach the mirrors and bolts towards me to make a distraction. At least it feels like that. From time to time, I feel like maybe I'm imagining it, but it happens all the time and I feel uneasy already. What's in those mirrors then? Has anyone witnessed something like that? Summer 2016. It was around midnight on a Saturday night. My best friend and I were at the beach observing a meteor shower, as we did every summer. After catching a couple of shooting stars, we witnessed a couple of flashes that lit almost the entire sky. Though we were surprised, we didn't give it much thought, as it could be related to whatever natural phenomenon, maybe even related to the meteor shower. On the way back home, though, these flashes kept happening. As strange as it sounds, it felt as if they chased our car from afar. My friend and I joked about it, but we didn't feel entirely in a joking way. Now, it's when things get real. Halfway to my friend's place, we drove through the woods to get to one of our favourite spots since childhood. Just a short tunnel in the back roads where we always used as a place to smoke a cig and listen to some 80s rock. The acoustics of the tunnel made it the perfect place for that. The tunnel is barely 15 metres long. We parked the car at its end, looking towards a crossroads. The road ahead climbs uphill through a dense eucalyptus forest. We lit a cigarette and put on some Frank Zappa tunes. It was all normal, and we were talking about uni and life in general, when all of a sudden, I saw a flash. I looked ahead and saw a beam of light. The light was projected diagonally from the top of the trees towards the road. The beam was mirrored on the other side of the road, so it looked like a V. This V of light kept getting brighter and brighter until it vanished. But the moment it vanished, the V was still there. Only this time, it was as if somebody had cropped it out of the picture in Photoshop. I could see all the way through the hill and the trees through this V. So far, I could see an old abandoned military radio station that's a kilometre away from the spot we were at. It was at this moment that I turned to my friend, and I saw his face was as shocked as mine probably was. We realised we both saw this, and somehow, even though Frank Zappa was playing loudly just seconds before, there was a moment of total silence, which I then noticed had started when the V light appeared. My friends and I looked at each other and, as if we communicated telepathically, we put on the belts, turned on the car, and got the hell out of there as fast as we could. My friend was so shocked, he He asked me to please drop him on his doorstep instead of the usual spot about 100 meters away from his house. Honestly, I was scared. I slept with my window closed that night. To this day, we have no idea what it was that happened that night, or how in the world that was even possible. All we know is that we both saw it, and we feel lucky to have witnessed such a strange phenomenon. So I live in a small seaside town called Blackpool in the UK that had a few important airfields during the war. It was home to 303 Squadron, who were the mostly Polish pilots trained by the RAF and were provided with Supermarine Spitfires, Hawker Hurricanes, and one other fighter aircraft, I believe. Anyway, the airfield became a fully fledged airport after the war, with a terminal building and many more hangars for commercial and private aircraft. Previously, it was just a grass runway and a few military hangars. During construction, they were knocked down, all except one. To this day, that one remaining hangar is maintained, and it's become a small museum. It contains the aircraft, along with equipment and even the uniform of R.G. Kellett, a commander of the squadron. I went for a visit once, as I'm super interested in the history of the aircraft, due to my granddad being a Spitfire pilot himself. I walked through the entrance and into the hangar, which had rope barriers around the aircraft that makes a one-way path around all the planes in there. After looking at the first plane and reading about it on a podium, I look up to see a man who looked about in his 40s, dressed in the RAF flying gear, with the leather cap, goggles around his neck, leather flying coat, a bright red scarf, and the smart uniform underneath. It's a dark blue uniform called Best Blues. I didn't really think anything of it at the time and assumed he's one of the staff dressed up in the traditional uniform to put on a show. I thought this because I'd seen a similar thing a few months prior in another museum where staff dressed up as World War I soldiers, Roman soldiers, pilots and stuff who were acting constantly and patrolling the museum. So I nodded and said hi, but he just stared forward, walks past me, getting about as close as 3 or so meters away, towards the door in which I entered, opens it and walks through it and shuts it behind him. I didn't think anything of it. Maybe he didn't see me or something. I forget and carry on through the museum and come across a staff member who's there to share information about the Spitfire that was parked there. We start talking, and I mention the guy in uniform about where he went. To this he responds, "We don't have anyone here that does that sort of thing. Are you sure you saw correctly?" I started doubting myself at that point, and yet again just forgot about it. A while later, I'm told by a friend that the hangar is supposedly haunted. I mention the uniformed guy I saw, and she just freezes and says no way. She still doesn't believe me and thinks I'm making it up. Thinking back, it kinda creeps me the fuck out. I haven't previously experienced anything like that before. What do you think? Okay, so this is what happened. I started meditating to a binaural beat, and I only set my alarm for 25 minutes. The closed eye visuals I was starting to get were fairly intense. I've never before closed my eyes and had visuals this clear through meditation before. And then my alarm goes off, so I quickly turned it off and lay down, continuing to meditate. This is where it starts to get really intense. About an hour into the meditation, it felt like magnets were pulling my head from side to side, and then what felt like invisible cords going through my ears, down my throat, and something felt attached to the back of my head, and then what felt like little spiders running around my ears on both sides of my head. I could actually feel the center of my brain. It was making a chugging sound, and I could genuinely feel it. I started having pretty insane visuals when all of a sudden, I started feeling these orgasmic tingles go up my back. Every time I would get a burst of these tingles, I would feel the top half of my astral body start to wiggle from side to side, like I was about to astral project. But my intuition was telling me there was another presence or entity. I didn't have a clue what any of these symptoms were at the time. I just continued meditating when all of a sudden I forgot everything about myself. I said to myself in my head, "Who am I?" And that's when I opened my eyes, kinda, because I just felt a touch of fear. When I opened my eyes, the only lighting in my room was my speaker light, so it was pretty dark, but I could still see most things. There were two shadows dancing in the corner of my room in a very weird way. They were only small, like hip height shadows, with arms and legs, but they looked like they were 100% there, I swear. I continued to watch them in awe when I noticed a human sized black figure leaning out of the cupboard at the end of my bed, looking around my room. This one was not a shadow, it was 3D. After watching these things for a few minutes, I walked to the lounge room where my brother was sleeping on the couch and told him everything I had just experienced, leaving out the parts about me hallucinating because I didn't want him thinking I was mental. As I was explaining what I experienced during the meditation, I was looking outside the glass back door, and there was this gremlin looking creature about hip height just staring me right in the eye. And there was no shadow. This was complete 3D. It was just bobbing back and forth. So I approached the door, and as I got to it, the creature just faded away in a way I can't explain. As I get outside, there's another shadow the same size, doing the same weird dance type thing that the shadow was doing in my room. The weird thing was that this shadow was dancing in front of the Buddha statue we have outside, enough for me not to be able to recognize the Buddha behind it. Completely mind-blowing for me because I had no clue about what was happening. When I returned to my bedroom, I wasn't hallucinating anymore. A few nights before all of that happened, just as I went to bed, I felt something decent size run onto my chest. So out of instinct, I smacked it as hard as I could. And what do you know? It's a wolf spider about 30 meters long from leg to leg. That all happened about 2 weeks ago. Last night, I went to my mate's for a catch-up, and I have a bunch of stuff in his shed from when I moved house and had nowhere else to fit it. I thought I'd just go have a suss at what I still had in there. I opened the door, and it's absolutely infested with redback spiders, like big fat ones everywhere, and it was only my stuff in the shed. Probably has nothing to do with this, but there is a chance. Tonight, when I did my meditation after having a bit of a break because of the intense hallucinations I previously experienced, I had the same feelings like spiders were crawling all over me. So I stopped the meditation early, just to be safe. Even after I stopped, it felt like there were spiders in my hair, on my legs and arms. I kept checking to make sure none of them were real, when bam, I find a spider, I don't know what type, crawling up my leg. I quickly took pictures to make sure it wasn't a hallucination. I know it sounds like utter bullcrap, but I swear none of this is a lie. I'm self-aware and honest as they come. I go outside for a smoke and start rereading a similar post on Reddit that mentions the spider feelings through meditation, when right behind where my phone is pointing, a redback starts to make its way to the floor from the bottom of a chair. And then a few minutes later, when I was standing near the back door, another small spider comes down from the roof right in front of me. I don't know what type of spider. So I put my hand out for it to land on, and as soon as it touched my hand, it quickly climbed back up its web to the roof. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, and I'm very aware it could just be a massive coincidence, but pretty creepy still, especially the one climbing up my leg after meditation. What do people suggest I do? Any advice would be great. This happened around 2007. I was 16 at the time, and some girlfriends and I decided to make our own Ouija board. It was the weekend, and we decided to take it to the grounds at the local high school instead of doing it in my friend's house. Thank God we at least had that sense. We set up and had the glass upside down with all of our pinky fingers on top. It moved, but I can't remember if or what it spelled. I've also felt skeptical about this before because you never really know if someone is just moving the glass. But all three of us agreed that we weren't manipulating it. While we were performing our little seance, there's a kid, 16, male, playing basketball within our sight. One of my friends recognized him and said his little brother, aged 10, died within the last year or so. The strange thing was this boy was alone and just shooting hoops. But over near one of the buildings was a kid about 10 years old just watching him. The boy played basketball by himself for a while and then left, never interacting with the younger boy. But the 10-year-old followed him when he left, but from a distance and still never actually interacting. My friends and I finished up and I went home later that afternoon. I was sleeping alone in my room that night when I woke up with my eyes still closed, and I could hear what I could describe as children's music. It was like the music that's one of those old music boxes and plays a melody when it's opened. I opened my eyes, and what I saw scared the absolute hell out of me. Right next to my bed, standing over me, was a completely black silhouette about the size of a 10-year-old boy. I was so afraid all I could manage to do was shut my eyes and just lay there, eventually rolling over to face the wall and cover myself in blankets while I silently cried. I managed to fall asleep again at some point and woke up in the safety of daylight. It never visited me again, and I'm not sure if it was the boy or if it was something else in that shape. I've never done another Ouija board. Fuck that. And I think it scared me so much I don't know if I'll be able to see a spirit again. My mum told me when I was young, 3 or 4, that I would tell her my late grandfather would sit on the end of my bed and make me feel good, in a loving family way. So I know I have the capability to speak to people from the spirit world. I just think about what happened that night, and I was so terrified. I think I may have a blockage now to protect me from ever feeling so afraid again.